me. All of that put together, it was the most successful endeavors, I think, for me. I was like, that was the beginning. And I love meeting people. It was wonderful. I had all my breakfast with all my guests. And I realized that's all it takes. You just create a place with passion and with that kind of involvement, and you meet your guests, you spend time with them. It's bound to be successful. And it's been a great journey after that since then.
So happy to hear that. I'm trying to contain my smile because I know when Bright Chesky started, it was all about meaningful connections, and it's just so amazing to see that come alive in such beautiful ways. We're very happy to hear that. I think we'll move to the next segment of our panel and talk a little bit about embracing equity. And Lisa, I want to start with you and understand a little from you in terms of potentially the kind of changes you would want to see in the music industry to really give women the opportunity to do far better. I know you spoke about some pieces in terms of all the biases, so would love to know a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think just a lot of it has to be a very dynamic mental shift in starting to see women as legitimate artists. It's a lot of the same difficulty that actresses have in the industry if they want to work as writers, if they want to work as directors, if they want to work as producers. It takes a long time, I think, for society to make that mental shift of legitimizing women in entertainment as beyond performers. So it's the same thing in the music industry. I think for so long women have been considered just singers. And there's so much more than that. Now, we can't just stand on a stage and sing at a microphone. You have to be full, well-rounded performers. You have to be dancers. You have to be songwriters. Legitimizing our own art with our own words, I think, is it's now become the most important thing for all music artists, male or female. So it's really mostly just a mental thing. I think we have to start training our brain to, like, when a woman walks into a label office, we should see them as an artist and not a singer. And it's just very far away from happening right now. I think we see a beautiful voice and we see a marketable, packageable woman, and we say, okay, that's done. But God forbid she asks for, the utility facilities to write her own music. Can I get in a room with a couple of different producers and sit and make an album? Like, well, I don't know if that's for you yet. Why don't we put a couple of male songwriters? Like, well, how are they going to get in my perspective of telling my story as a woman and translate that into words and make it into a song? So I think first step is just to mentally really just cleanse our minds of this idea that men are the end-all be-all artists, that women are now we're just so much further beyond being singers. And we're bona fide performers and artists. So that's the first step. And I think the second thing, which is, in women like me and a lot of my peers that I see doing this as well, it'll take us to be the woman at the table who bring in other women to the table. So it's going to be a generational thing that happens, because I think mine is the first generation in which I'm starting to see label offices and production offices being staffed by more and more women. And in positions of power. So one is a mentality shift, and two is employing more women in these offices and on the back end. Because for every single performer, there's a team of 35 people behind them in the offices making it all happen. And the more staffed with women they are, especially for women artists, the better. Because then their perspective is given legitimacy, then they're getting resourced as well as the men. And we're so far away in the music industry from achieving any sort of pay parity. That's like a dream if we even get close to that. But I firmly believe it unfortunately almost always has to begin with women helping each other. And then inviting up, the invitation's always there, but it will take some time, I think, before men see that as well. I'd really love to challenge them to a little faster would be great.
That's so true. And do you see a difference in the way things have been in India versus your time in the US? Or do you think it's more like a situation globally pretty much at par?
I think the West has just had a lot more time to develop its music industry. Ours is still a very nascent industry beyond playback, because we've been a playback-led industry, male and female, for so long, and the categories have always been separate. There's a composer, there's a songwriter, then there's a singer. So now we're looking at a really big shift into all three being just one person, which the West started doing about 40 years ago. They also started this way. So it just comes in waves, I think. So it will change. It's bound to change. It has to. But I think we're about a decade before we get to where they are. And yeah, I think that's what it'll take.
Yeah. More power to women like you who've started
we're trying.
change. And I think that's a really good segue to my question to Katie. I think for you, from the opportunities for women, because if I were to look at your journey as an outsider and somebody who's really been inspired by it, I think there's a lot that you've also kind of faced. I'm sure comparisons, ups and downs, very, very interesting kind of moments in life which were spoken about and discussed in various forms, and it's not always been easy. So we'd just love to hear a little bit more from you on that.
Okay, what's the question?
Specifically. Two questions.
Okay.
I'd love to know a little bit about your journey, and in terms of, how have you kind of dealt with some of the challenges, whether it's comparisons or ups and downs. And I think what really inspired you to therefore, is there a connection, and then what inspired you to work in the space for girls' education and more opportunities for women?
So I'd say, when it comes to, firstly, the easy one, my decision to work in cinema. This is my third profession. I was a banker before this. I worked in an NGO. In fact, my very first job was with the UN Development Fund for Women in Delhi. I always thought of myself, I studied history and international relations. I wanted to give back. I understood that I came from a position of great privilege in a country like India, and I had ambition, and I wanted to live a good life. And I wanted to spend a lot of money on travel. That was also a huge incentive. But I just felt that when you're surrounded by glaring inequity, how can you not want to make other people's lives better if you can? And if it's really not difficult for you. I know so many people who give so much more of themselves. So, whether it came to supporting a cause financially, giving your time, working for Teach for India, or we have a Padodi Trust as well, and we work with acid attack victims. We've donated our eyes. So wherever you can give back to society, I feel like one should. And that was something just that we learned as children. In terms of my decision then to move on from a corporate field to acting, it was because I enjoyed theatre, and monetarily it was very attractive also. And financial independence, to go back to that, is key. It doesn't matter whether you come from wealth or you come from privilege. You need to earn your own money to be able to be empowered to make your own decisions, and I was very clear that I wanted to make certain decisions that other people may not agree with. And the only way I can do that is that I don't have to defer or ask for help. My parents were very supportive, but they respected my decisions. They said, when you're 18, we're investing heavily in your education, so that when you turn a certain age, you go out there and you make your decisions. We're there to guide you, but you live your life. And I did. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. But I learned from them, and I've lived my own life and made my own decisions. So working in cinema was something that I wanted to do. I knew that it would open me up to a lot of public criticism. I'd always been an A-grade student. I was used to doing well. I did perhaps think that this was going to be easier than it was. My first report card was not good at all. But I am also somebody who has always been quite thick-skinned. I can take criticism. It doesn't shake me to my core. I deal with a lot of criticism on a daily basis, personally, from people that I know, from people who love me, and from people who are strangers on Instagram and other venues. And I really feel like I absorb what is constructive, and I just deflect what is not. And I don't know where that comes from. I think it comes from a third child perspective. I think it comes from a lot of security from, we tend to go back to my childhoods. I think I had a very secure childhood. I think I saw my father weather a lot of setbacks in his life, from losing his eye at the age of 21, going on to obviously do very well in his career. A lot of people from the outside think it must be easy to come from privilege, but I saw him lose a lot as well in his life, and he always took it in his stride. I think in terms of character, that was a huge inspiration for me. That things like money and celebrity come and go, but you have to be made of stronger stuff to weather all the different things. Like nobody knew COVID was going to come, lockdown was going to come. Of course, it has destroyed people in ways that it was just an inconvenience for us, perhaps. But how you fare in situations like that, I think those are the most important things. Being a student of history also, I really see how minute and minuscule we all are in the face of time. And that brings me back to travel again. Only when you travel, only when you go outside of your comfort zone, even if you think that you're the biggest star in Mumbai, and you go somewhere and you stand in front of the Grand Canyon, and you just should feel tiny and insignificant in the face of nature. And when you allow yourself to feel that, insignificant and tiny, I think that gives you a huge amount of perspective on life, such that when you come back to your home in your city and whatever you're doing in life, that should change your attitude to things around you. So again, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I just feel like travel gives you perspective, and when you come back, if you can give of yourself and try and impact the world around you, like you said, even if it's one person who you change, I think when you become a parent, that one person becomes your child, and you really see the return on your investment, the time you spend. My child is now 5, and we have conversations every day where I can see other influences in her life and why I need to sort of, I don't want to use the word brainwash, but correct her a little bit, according to what I think is right. And those daily conversations are so important in terms of shaping and sending out an individual into the world. We can do a lot of damage as well as parents. So again, I don't know if I've answered your question, but next question.
No, you have, and you have thoroughly answered my question, and there was a huge applause for that part. Let's give a round of applause for that part. So I think that's it takes a lot. It takes a lot to be able to bring in that relatability, and especially in a world like yours, where you did always have that attention from the external world. I'm sure that must have been really hard, and I do want to come to you, Kakuli, because on the absolute other end of the equation, you work with a lot of marginalized women, and I hate to use that word, but you do work with a lot of women.
It's when I say marginalized women that I work with in Rajasthan, they were actually